Hello, everyone, and thank you for choosing Alternatives, the access television program that provides a forum for local talent to express thoughts, issues, and the emotion that surrounds our lives. I'm Al DiGiacomo, your host for today's program. And joining us once again is Salvatore Amico M. Buttacci. Sal has been writing ever since he was a child. He's a graduate of Seton Hall University, where he majored in drama, and has written and directed several full-length plays. He is an English teacher at Thomas Jefferson Middle School in Garfield, as well as an adjunct professor at Bergen Community College, where he teaches writing courses. Most recently, he wrote a collection of poems called Promising the Moon, as well as A Family of Sicilians, Stories and Poems. His poems have also appeared in publications in Italy, India, and Canada, as well as the United States. And Sal has won numerous writing awards. In March, his poem Love Fall, in both English and Italian, won the first honorable mention in a poetry contest in Italy. Sal is also a founding member of the Saturday Afternoon Poets, a poetry group that reaches out to local libraries and coffee houses to expose people to the poetic words and emotions of life. Sal, thank you for being here once again and talking about A Family of Sicilians and to read some of your work.
Good. It's a pleasure coming back.
Let's talk about the Sicilians, and what were some of the reasons that they migrated to the United States back in the, well, I guess it was before the 20th century?
What's interesting is prior to 1870, the Italians from the mainland came to America, and the Sicilians did not. The Sicilians, for a long time, though poor, were under the protective arm of a lot of the monarchs, and most of the riches were found in the kingdom of the two Sicilies, for example, Naples and Sicily. But after that, when Garibaldi united Italy, then things went bad for Sicily, really bad. So much so that after 1870, they started coming, and particularly 1900, 1905, 1910, in those years.
Leading into the teens and 20s.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. My father came in 1920. My grandfather in 1905. Poverty, a land that no longer could be cultivated. It was barren. Sickness, unemployment, everything kind of chased them out of their own country. It was really sad.
Yeah, they're very close to mainland Italy.
Yes.
Is there any true connection between the mainland and the island of Sicily?
Well, Sicily is part of Italy. They don't really call Sicily independent of Italy. They have a kind of quasi-independent government, more of a protectorate than anything, because they are linked with Italy itself. But most of the manufacturing, most of the money is in the north, and it's not filtering down to the south. This is the problem. It's like Sicily's been cut off and left to just...
Is this the reason why there is a Sicilian language separate from the Italian language?
Well, Sicily and America have different backgrounds. You know, someone once said to me, what's the difference between an Italian and a Sicilian? Well, the difference is the Sicilian was conquered by 13 different invaders, most of which, almost all of which, were not conquerors of Italy. Therefore, they're not the same people. They're not influenced. You are influenced by the conqueror. So the Arab, for example, the Saracen, who taught Sicily tuna fishing, of all things, you know.
Invasion of Hannibal and things like that?
Yeah, everything that Sicily has, they owe to their conquerors. That's the irony of being conquered. So you get the best of your conquerors. The rest you let go. But they are different. I think their mentality is different from what I can see.
And there's a difference between the Sicilian and the Italian with language?
Okay, definitely a difference. Italian is the Tuscan language that Dante spoke. In fact, it's an interesting point. Sicilian almost became the language of all of Italy because it had, founded by the King Frederick II of Hohenstaufen, he was kind of like a lover of Sicily. He was the king of Sicily, the king of Jerusalem, the King of Germany, and the Holy Roman Emperor, all rolled into one. Back in the 1200s, for 40 years, he once was quoted as saying, if God, no, not if God, God would not have chosen Palestine if he had seen my kingdom of Sicily. Now, I think those are pretty powerful words to say, maybe
Yes.
a little off-handed, sort of, but still, Sicilian would have been the language. But what happened was there was Dante, there was Petrarch, there was Boccaccio, and they were so overwhelming in their work that Tuscanian became the Italian mother tongue, and Sicilian was kind of left to flounder among the Sicilians. But it's a different source language. Italian's from Latin and their own dialects, but Sicilian is from Arabic, Norman, French, Spanish. I mean, we're talking about a language that is much richer than Italian.
So there's a lot of ingredients in our
Oh,
sauce.
yes. That's, you bet, you bet. Absolutely, well put.
Okay, being from Lodi, are there similarities with your childhood neighborhood in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, to the old ways in Sicily?
Are you saying, do I see a little bit of my childhood in Lodi? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes.
As far as Sicily goes?
Yeah, being from Lodi. Do you see the comparisons between Sicily, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and Lodi? 'Cause
Okay, I see your point. You're asking me to tie them together, right? Well, as I had mentioned in the last show, you might recall I said that Williamsburg, Brooklyn had a lot of different elements, different ethnic groups, and we all got along. In Lodi, at one time, Lodi was very much an Italian community. Prior to that, they were French.
I did not know that.
Yes, because of the different mills, the silk industry in
sure.
Patterson. In fact, you'll see a lot of French names and streets in Lodi. And of course, as I said, there were a lot of Italians. There are still Italians, and I would still call Lodi an Italian town, but not to the extent of years ago. Williamsburg, Brooklyn, of course, I went back with my wife. It's mostly Hispanic. Towns change as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
New people come in, just as the Irish once lived, and then the Italians came to their place and replaced them. That's the story of diversity.
Well, what do you say we get into your book that is out of print now, A Family of
Yes.
Sicilian Stories and Poems, and what will you be reading for our viewers at home now, Sal?
Well, I think I'd like to read a poem, and the poem is called Sicily. I'd like to mention something about this poem, if I may.
Please do.
This poem ended up in an anthology called Bilingual Anthology. It was published, Italian-American bilingual. It was published in Italy in 1985. And the book contains poems by Italian-Americans like Ferlinghetti, Gregory Corso, Danielle Josephi, and my poem. But there's a woman in that book who has a poem, and it's the woman that influenced me as a kid to get into poetry. Her name was Rosa Zanoni Marinoni. Her name sounds like a poem. It's such a pleasant musical name. I had read her when I was 10 from a book of hers called Timberline, and I fell in love with poetry because of her. And we ended up in the same anthology. This poem, Sicily, is in that book. I did not write the Italian translation. Professor Alfonsi did, who edited the book. Not because you are maligned do I love you, underdog of the mainland, a stone booted into the waters of the Mediterranean, the island where fools insist crime was born once when a young Sicilian groom avenged his bride who died at the rapist's hand. Sicily, land where my fathers and mothers sleep soundly, I love you for your wisdom, born of honor, your loyalty to the millennia, buried in unwritten history, your traditions carried down in strict lineage that sidesteps death's having its own way with words. Sicily, you can never die, you who outlived the invading hordes of every color, you who took from each only the best and from it grew the wiser. For you, there can be no death. In my memories, the old black-garbed widows exchange deathbed-side stories. Children play soccer in the after-school sun, shadows tall in the piazza, the church tower bell tolling the Angelus. In my memories, the young faces of pretty women averting their eyes from the stare of l'Americano. The bus ride over the hilly terrain, noisy with conversation. Cobblestone streets, each a hero's name. The spirit of my great-grandfather, Giovanni, still lauding the Garibaldi myth. And my grandfather, Salvatore, explaining why Mussolini lost the war. Sicily, I love you because you are the haven, the hideaway, the heaven in the province of my heart, the touchstone of all I learned as a child, the voiceless cry of my ancestry. I see you in the evening dusk, a mild scirocco blowing the hair into your eyes, your hair swirling across dark complexion. Again, the taxi is honking outside. Hurriedly, we make promises. We boast about how our love is invincible. Sing a sad song keeps running through my mind. Sicily in the taxi's rearview mirror, the quickly receding countryside, a blurred panorama distorted by my tears. Without a word, without so much as turning his eyes from the rocky road, the Sicilian driver offers me a handkerchief.
Very nice, Sal.
Thank you. Thank you very
That
much.
was very nice.
Thank you.
Now, we had talk about some of the differences between the mainland Italians and the Sicilians. Is there a big difference between their diet, what Sicilians consisted in their diet versus the mainlands?
Well, from what I can understand, I'm not a connoisseur of culinary arts, but I know that in Sicily you have a lot of, especially around the perimeter of Sicily, a lot of fish, although there is no water where my parents came from, so therefore they really were not big fish eaters. Depends on where in Sicily. But red sauce is very big. The artichoke is big. Of course, the olive throughout Italy. But I would say, especially in Sicily.
Now, Sicily also took a very large destructive hit during the Second World War.
Right.
Did they more or less have to scratch back up with their own ingenuity, or did the Marshall Plan actually help them out also?
Well, the Marshall Plan helped Italy, and
but Sicily is the forgotten little island.
yes,
Did
but
it actually?
It did help Sicily. Although you can go to Sicily and you'll still see damage done that was not rebuilt.
Malta Cassini?
I'm not sure. I would assume that they did rebuild it. I don't know for certain, you know. But the houses, I always marvel at the houses of Sicily. They stand, these stone houses, in that hot sun, you know, 300-400 years. It's hard to believe. 300-400 years they're still standing. And we consider a house in America, 90 years old, as worthless. It's too old. You know,
Well, that's why they made them out of stone, because they really hold up. Let's kind of talk about some of the famous Sicilian contradictions.
Okay, sure.
And between the machismo and mother, and the difference, the contradiction between sons and daughters. Let's start off with macho and mother.
Okay. When an Italian soldier in Italy during the wars lay dying, he did not call out God's name, nor did he call out his girlfriend's name, but he called his mother's name. It was Mamma Mia. It was like the last person he remembered before he died. Italian, and this is true for Latin as well, by the way, because this, to me, is not peculiar only to Sicilians. It's an Italian thing. It's a Latin thing. They are very close to their mothers. You know, in America, that's almost a terrible thing to say, because in America, one might say, well, mama's boy, the Italian. But the Italian would be the first to argue that, because he is also the one who wants to be considered manly, you know.
I think there's that fine line between sensitivity and being powerful and strong.
Right.
and we have mastered it.
Yeah, you know, you walk into an Italian gathering, you know this, Al. If you know, you see your mother or your grandmother or your aunt, what's the, no big deal. You go over, you give her a kiss on each cheek, you know, the greeting. It's a very warm.
As a Sicilian, have you ever found yourself going to greet someone like this who is not part of the kind of way that we express our tenderness, and to give somebody who you don't know very well or a different nationality, give them a unwarranted peck on the cheek and they're mortified?
I try not to do that unless I know the person. I don't.
I have been mortified, yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I did it. I once. It's funny because my brother-in-law's brother, they came from Naples, and his wife was from Naples. And when I first met her, I went to her and I kissed her. She moved back, and later her husband said, "My wife doesn't want you to kiss her." And I'm thinking, is it me? But it wasn't me at all. She just didn't want that closeness. She thought that maybe because she was married that someone else shouldn't.
What about the comparisons and the contradictions between a son and a Sicilian son and a Sicilian daughter?
All right. That's a very, very good question. From what I can remember, I suppose as a Sicilian son, I got away with a lot more than my sisters did as Sicilian daughters. I remember my sister Anna, who passed away in 1999. She was 5 years older than I. And my father said, "No, you will not date until you're 17 years old." And yet, I remember going out on dates when I was 14, you know. It was different.
Again,
because you know what it is? It's the protectiveness that fathers, Sicilian fathers, and probably all fathers to an extent, feel towards their girls, their women. And I don't want to say that because, in a way, it sounds sexist. But
oh, it sure does.
and it is sexist.
Yes, it is.
It is. But the fact remains that that's the way they handled it. They were from the old school, and that's what they believed.
Where do you believe the strange mix of religion versus superstition came from, and still strong in Sicilian life today?
I don't know, but wherever it came from, the Irish got it too. And so did so many other ethnic groups. I mean, the Hispanics have it. I don't think you could talk to anyone who doesn't have some kind of superstition blended into the religion. It's just, it's a phenomenon that's hard to explain. One would have to...
My Sicilian grandmother had all these little things that you couldn't do. You couldn't eat this food with this food, because strange things would happen to you. You would be possessed or something, or you don't want to, what are some of the ringing in the ears that someone is speaking your name or speaking ill of you? Are there some of the other little superstitions that come to your mind?
The one that comes to my mind right away is the evil eye.
The evil eye, yes.
Malocchio. The evil eye. So if something's not going right, you say, "I would be a success today if it wasn't for, Luigi Corleone or something, who gave me the evil eye." Now, if that guy would just kind of die or something, or leave town, or stop it, I could be a success. Well, it's kind of like a crutch, you know. But the evil eye is very real. I heard that all the time when I was in Sicily.
Someone would put the fix on you.
I have the curse. I have the
yeah,
curse.
Yeah, and and you would have to find your way out of this all by yourself, or go and pray to penance or something.
Right.
There is also the tolerance of others that Sicilians have, but they have a kind of a distrust for the Americani. The Americans. Why is that?
As a boy growing up, we were two. We were the Sicilian people, and everybody else in the world were L'americani. Everyone else in America, I mean, were L'americani. And sometimes even the Italians, my father called L'americani, because he felt that many of them kind of sold out and became just like the American people. But he never taught us disrespect of them, or he never said to us, for example, "They're no good." He just said, "They don't understand us, we don't understand them." So whenever anything was done that he didn't like, he'd say, "Sure, l'americano. What do you want?"
It's their way.
That's the way they are. They don't think. If you had an appointment with my father and you didn't show up at 5 the way you said, he'd count the minutes from 5 o'clock, and he'd say, "Well, this person's not keeping his appointment." And he'd say, "Americano."
Keeping the word is a very Sicilian
Ooh.
thing. It's almost like I said, what's portrayed inside the movies.
There's nothing like the Sicilian word. They live and they die by their word. And that's something I was brought up with. Even in my own personal life, if I make a promise, I keep it at any cost.
Again, like we were saying, keeping the word. Going back to what we had discussed in our first program.
Yes.
Movies like Sopranos and Godfathers, where 30 years ago with The Godfather, people got across the world got the viewpoint of how Sicilians were. You don't disrespect the family, or you don't disrespect the bada bing with The Sopranos. What are your thoughts on the way Sicilians are portrayed?
I'm totally
From
against
Holland.
it. I see nothing wrong with portraying a Sicilian as a man who keeps his word. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's noble.
Protects his family,
Protects
provides
his
for his
family,
family.
provides, loves his family, wants to be respected. My father wanted to be respected. He earned respect, but he said, "You don't respect me, I don't respect you." Now, you may have seen that in a scene from The Sopranos, all well and good, but it's kind of looking at virtue through a dark, opaque glass. That's not virtue. That's a representation of it. See? So I'm totally against these shows. I like them to show Italians and Sicilians and all other ethnic groups as regular people.
It's very hard to see other ethnic or religious groups who have fought hard against being stereotyped and have won.
Mm.
And I'm just kind of wondering how they get away with it with Sicilians. Is it that we're not vocal towards it?
What I'm going to say may hurt a lot of feelings, but the Italians and the Sicilians can watch a show like Sopranos, because I know I was on a TV show. Steve Adubato was the host, and somebody called in Italian and said, "What's your problem? There's nothing wrong. It's just clean fun. Loosen up." Well, here's the thing. We are our own enemies, our worst enemies, because we find these things that we should be unhappy about and find not so funny. We laugh at them. We laugh at everything.
Roll off our back and we get on with our life.
It's nothing. So they're making a fool of us, you know. It's like
We know who we are on the inside, so say what you will.
Yeah, but that's baloney. I think it's just that they're not really into their own roots, and they could care less. They're more American than Italian or Sicilian, so what do they care? I like to believe that I'm both.
Absolutely. Sal, time is almost our enemy again. I'd love to hear another piece. We've got about 2 minutes here. Can we fit something in?
Okay, let me read that short poem called Sicilian Towns.
All right.
I love the sound of Sicilian towns like Bolognetta, Sutere, and Cannecati. To read on a map, places like that, Enna, Ragusa, and Musameli. My heart leaps high when I hear the cry of Bagaria, Messina, and Trapani. I cannot explain the effect of these names like Ribera, Favara, Leccara Friddi. Each one a song that moves me along. Comiso, Catania, Casteltermini, each one a prize I give to my eyes. Segesta, Sciacca, San Cataldo. Castles and vines, oh Sicily mine. Castelbuono, Marsala, Castro Reale. What could compare to the cool mountain air of Tauramina, Maraneo, and Corleone? And where can the sea more bluer be than in Cefalù, Palermo, and Porto Empedocle? But the village most dear, the one I most cheer, Lupaese, about which I admit I'm most crazy, Acqua Viva Platane. I love the sound of Sicilian names.
Sal, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
I was sitting here and I was listening to your enunciations, and it brought back memories of me being in my in my grandparents' home in Florida.
Very nice.
So, Mom, this is for you. I love you. I had to do it. And with that, we are out of time for our program today. Poet, teacher, lecturer, and all-around great Siciliano, Salvatore Amico M. Buttacci has been our guest. Sal, thank you for coming back and giving us all a guided tour to your Sicilian heritage and keeping it alive.
My pleasure.
I want to thank OK TV Access crew for making it all work behind the scenes. And of course, thanks to all of you for watching at home. So if you're wanting to find out a little bit more about OK TV and what we do, please log on to our website at oktv.org for contacts and all the current information. And until next time, I'm Al DiGiacomo. Thank you for watching Alternatives.